Okay, hello. I'm here for another episode of Reflections, and this time I'm joined by Elements. How's it going?
What's up? How's it doing, Thorn?
It's not doing too bad. You're someone where I've wanted to talk to you for a long time, and this is why. Okay, I've interviewed almost every other member of CLG, like past or present. So I've talked around and about you and all these things, but I never got to talk to you yourself. So I want to know your side on some of the things that have happened in history and in your career. 'Cause it was quite a long career. Okay, so if we start out at the beginning, everyone, if I ask them now, like I don't know if you've ever seen these charts of like how like what the like when there's a chart of like how many people are in gold in all of LCS or whatever, or in all of the in the ladders rather, and you always tend to find out it's usually surprising, like actually like 80% of people aren't gold or above, they're in like silver and bronze, etc. And so what you usually find out is like, oh, my own perception's a little bit off. Well, in the same sense, if you ever look into like stats on when people got into esports, like half of the people, it's always like the last year that they got into esports. So if I ask most people out on Reddit, for example, who is Elements, they're going to say either the guy from Curse or maybe some will say the guy from CLG. But you were there from like the very beginning of League of Legends, right? You were like one of those day one almost guys. Like, what was it like back then? Were you actually really? When did you become like a hardcore player?
I started playing Dota after I got into Warcraft 3, and I was pretty good at Warcraft 3. But after I transitioned into Dota, I really liked the style gameplay that it was, the items, the competition, and just the competitiveness of it, because Dota was huge on these leagues. They were just really fun, and like people get banned, and it was just like it was a great competitive environment. And I've always been a really just competitive person. And then one of the dudes in the league just was like, hey, there's a new MOBA style game like Dota coming out called League of Legends. Signed up for the beta. I got in pretty quickly, and I just loved the game ever since.
So this is obviously, when I say this part is really ancient history, but you were actually in the original team before TSM called All or Nothing, which was Reginald. And this was like, people have to realize at the time, Reginald was just a player as well. This wasn't TSM. He wasn't a big star at the time. Like, how many of the people from your era were actually at the very beginning then? I know in like season 2 and stuff, a lot of those players were all around the same era, but were a lot of them beginners like you at the very, very beginning of the game?
It's when I joined, like Reginald, Dan Din, who else was big back then?
Was that HotShot back then?
Tree Eskimo, I think Jat was playing a lot then too. Hotshot was playing around that time. We actually went versus CLG in that original tournament with AON, and I actually like used to like look up to those guys when I first started playing. I was like, oh, they're so good, like like kill Reginald, like dude, take a screenshot. I'm like, yes, like that was like that kind of like fandom feeling. But I don't know, I just kept playing the game, kept rising up in the ranks, and and eventually started playing a lot with those guys, and they they need another player, so I worked my way up to actually playing on that team. So that's kind of the original history of that.
When CLG was formed and this first lineup existed and the first few iterations of it, when people always mention like winning that World Cyber Games, I always think I have a really different perspective on that tournament to how fans think of it now. Because a lot of fans, like I was describing before, they're thinking to themselves, World Cyber Games? That's sort of like Worlds. That's like they've won like Season 0 Worlds. But I was actually at that WCG in LA, and I remember no one watched League of Legends at the time. It was off on like side stage, and also it was 4 teams, and it was like an invitational. Okay, so I don't want to like bring everyone's party down, but at the time, what was League of Legends like at the time? Give me the setting of the scene.
Well, it was like a somewhat international stage. It was basically like a mini Worlds. Only one team from like each region got through. So it was like there was one Southeast Asian team, there was one European team, which was SK at the time. We were the North American representatives, CLG, and I can't remember.
It was a Chinese team, I think.
Yeah, I think it was the Chinese team as well. So it was like basically like a mini Worlds. It wasn't the biggest scale thing either. It was like D-Man and Freak casting with like microphones walking around on stage and stuff like that. Like it was like so like B quality compared to like what we have now in esports.
So one of the people from the era of the first era of CLG, that's always been really mysterious to me, because I only got involved in League of Legends at the end of Season 2. And so all the games I saw of Bigfatlp was him on the downside. Like I'm seeing him against Messiah or like these people who are blowing him out of the server. But I hear all these stories. Like, for example, Saint tells me that there was a time when, in his opinion, Bigfatlp was like what Faker is today. You know, he was like by far the best player, and he won every game, won every lane. Was it really as crazy as that at some point in time?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like everybody on CLG was just like hard carrying each other. Like every single game, like everyone would just carry it. But like GG was just like, like that again, like a step above everybody else. He was like truly like just a god at that game. Went back in those first 2 seasons. I don't think anybody could stop him or anybody could contend him in a solo lane.
I realize obviously that like the meta itself didn't even exist back then. But what were his strengths? What was he good at? What kind of champions was he good on, do you think?
He was I think for a time it was he was a mid laner for a while, like me and him, because like I don't know, the dynamic was so strange back then. Like I was a solo laner with GG and Chowster and even Hotshot. Like we all just kind of like rotated through solo, like whatever champions we were good at is the champions we just play solo. Like for instance, at WCG, I was playing Annie top versus Morgana, like just for instance of like how stupid the meta was, and like we were playing like Garen, Taric and stuff bot lane. So the meta was just like completely out of whack then. But like it's basically whatever champions you were good at, you could win with. I feel like that's like what the meta was. It's like whatever you just like played the most and knew how to win with, because like everything was almost like a broken champion back then too. Like everything was really strong, and the game was a lot less balanced. So you could abuse a lot of strats and weaknesses between enemy teams and stuff like that.
When you think back to the season 1 championship, everyone knows the storyline was everyone from America. This will never happen again, but everyone from America imagined they were a lot better than the Europeans. They thought, we're coming over to this tournament, we're going to win this thing. It's going to be CLG or TSM first. The European teams, who are these guys? Like they're going to be below us. What do you think happened at that tournament? How did it go so shockingly like the other way? Like these AAA and Fnatic just win the tournament. Like what do you think? What was wrong for NA?
So basically what happened in season 1 is I can say for at least CLG's sake, we definitely were like, thinking our shit didn't smell. Like we were like uncontested, I think, for about a year and a half, first place. Like after WCG, like nothing, not a single team, even the Koreans, the Chinese guys are all playing a North American server. Like we would just massacre everybody. And it was like, we all got such like big egos going into that tournament. I think we just kind of like defeated ourselves. In that sense, there's so much fighting and all this stuff, and we couldn't, just like win the games we should have been winning. And I think that was, just a big shocker, because that's also when you're saying like TSM and like all these teams we expected to just like steamroll, but that's when the meta changed actually, and the Europeans discovered that the AD support bot lane was just like the superior combo to throw bot lane, and that really steamrolled that tournament. Was just the European meta just taking a big dump all over the North American meta. I think that's what season 1 was.
When you think of that CLG era, that lineup, what's strange about that lineup is, okay, so the famous lineup of Hotshot, Saintvicious, Bigfatlp, Chauster, and Elementz. These are the 5 before like the 2012 era, and yet the strange thing is the only 2 tournaments you won during that era were the ones where you had the subs each time. So you had Boy subbing, then you had Salsa subbing. So what was the actual classic lineup I mentioned there, the one that didn't win the lands? What was that actually good at? What was the style of that team, do you think?
I don't know. I don't know exactly what the style was. Again, I think CLG was more like we were losing these tournaments because it was big ego things. People wanted the solo lane, and people weren't, there wasn't like set roles per se, like there was and there wasn't. And I think CLG's just like overall issues were just, again, like we were all kind of like, as the team progressed, we all just kind of got like more and more, upset with each other, and, more and more drama and more issues. And it just kind of like hit like a boiling point where we just couldn't work as a 5-man group. And it was actually more beneficial to have like a sub come in and just like work with us and, not, have, all these different opinions on what to do. And it's just like, yeah, that sounds good. And, we do this and, do that. And we just needed like, basically, I think CLG's biggest problem was too many Chiefs, not enough Indians. That saying, everyone was trying to lead and everyone was trying to be, the big cheese on the team. And we just needed more players that were just good mechanically and could, follow calls.
Since you played during the prime of Hotshot, because 2012 was when gradually people started to say he wasn't as good, and you saw him do all the position swaps and all that stuff, which I think's really hurt his career now in terms of how people think of him. He's another player where people who are modern day people think of he's almost a joke, like, oh, he had to retire and he wasn't good enough and all that. But during this period, 2011 was when in theory he was at his peak. That was when everyone had to ban Italy and he was supposedly at his best. When do you think Hotshot was like in his prime, and what was he good at when he was in his prime?
Well, he was obviously, Nidalee god, but he was just a fantastic solo laner, and he just had the mechanics and the smarts to outplay people in 2011, and actually it's going into season 2. I'd say after season 2 he kind of like fell off a little bit, but just before that he just had I'd say the desire to be the best, and I think he might have lost the desire to be number one, because he was like number one player for about after GG kind of started to fall off a little bit. I think Hotshot really carried CLG in terms of just like the play and the style of play he would make. He was just so aggressive on Nidalee, and no one could stop him. Granted, I mean, Nidalee was also like 20 times more broken back then. Like the stuff that you could do with Nidalee was just so obnoxious, and he just fine-tuned that champion, mastered it, and learned a couple other champions to go along with it, and just it was basically like cat and mouse, literally. and I guess all I can really say is just he was just an amazing player in that time and just strived to be number one, and he was.
As someone who played with him and then got to observe as like an outsider later on in his career, what if you had to kind of like put something down to like what made him fall off? Because I remember one of the strange things was even the CLG players almost like sort of decided that he could only do one thing. Like Chauster and them would just say, no, all that Hotshot's going to do is he's just going to play a tank. He's just going to like help him like peel in team fights for double lift, and that's all he's going to do. And then then it sounded like he himself believed it, and he's like, oh, that's all I can do. And then when that didn't work, it just went downhill and downhill. Like when someone in theory has been the best player at one point in time, do you have a theory as to why they can just drop off completely like that? Like could Hotshot still be playing today and still be a really, really good top player?
I definitely think Hotshot has the skill, has the potential, if you're really committed to doing it. And I think the reason he did fall off is because once, I feel like in this community, obviously speaking for myself, but it's like once something has been decided, it's really hard to change people's opinion. And if you ever have like a slump for a little while, like Hotshot again, for instance, he's playing at this top tier level, amazing, undisputed rank 1, player in the game. And then it's just, these little chips, these little comments, everything starts getting under your skin. And if you really don't have your team backing you, like you just said yourself, CLG thought that he could only do one thing. So if your team that you've been relying on for the last 2 years tells you that you can only do one thing every single time over and over and over again, you almost start believing it. And I mean, I think a lot of players in League basically beat themselves just through overthinking stuff or just not having the confidence in themselves anymore, because that's actually a huge problem I find in League and the teams I've been involved with, is that the teams don't really actively support each other like a sports team would. And that's honestly probably why he fell off, is because he didn't get the support that he needed to continue being the number one player.
Was this period of CLG, was this your prime, do you think, as a player?
Yeah, I think I had 2 spikes. I think in season 2, I was playing a lot of fiddlesticks and Blitzcrank were my 2 mains. I was basically pulling 2 bans, every pick and ban phase, if not more. I felt incredibly confident in my team. I felt incredibly confident in myself. I felt like I could play versus anybody. We had some Korean team experience with like the MLG stuff, and I was hooking these guys that like everyone's like, oh my god, these guys are amazing. And I was beating them in lane, and going up against Gambit's bot lane and stuff like the Edward, and I was contesting with these guys. I was incredibly confident. And I think that's all when I was on Curse. And that season 2, I think I was really, really strong then. Season 3, I had a little bit more. I'd say I was a little bit more passive, a little bit more just like a average player coming into season 3 near my end of the LCS split. And then the other spike was probably at my prime was probably I'd actually say it's probably the WCGs. In that year, I was very committed to League. It's pretty much all I did, and I just like lived and breathed the game completely, and just like really enjoyed and loved the game. So I was just able to do the plays I wanted to make and be confident about what I was doing.
When people talk about you as a player, there's like you were saying there, once something sticks, it's like it's impossible to change that mind state almost. And so the storyline people are going to think about Elementz is like, along with CLG, when they were the gods of NA, every player in theory was the best at his position. Okay, yeah. At that point in time, he was really good and he was on top. But then the storyline is almost like the rock and roll thing. Like, oh, when they get to the top, they just stop practicing and, they all thought they were really good. And so people have always said about you that the reason why you got removed from teams or you would get benched or anything, people say you just didn't put in the hours. You didn't want to be the absolute best anymore. Like maybe you could get motivated for the game when it was the tournament game, but you weren't the guy who was going to put in like the million hours in practice. Was there any truth to that over your career?
Yeah, there's definitely some truth to it, but it's obviously been skewed, or at least I think it's been skewed from perspectives and stuff like that, because these are all issues that I brought up with my teams, and staying motivated on a game you've been playing for like as long as I have is a personal thing to overcome, to stay just as committed and stay as passionate as you need to be a number one player. But on CLG, I definitely say it was my issue. I think I did get, my head was a little bit too big, and I wasn't putting in the hours that I needed to anymore. I was trying to focus on more like my personal life, because I was like, we're number one. I think definitely that happened on CLG. On Curse, on the other hand, I feel like on Curse I was just kind of like just beat up in terms of like on like my mistakes and stuff like that. I feel like I basically didn't have anybody to fall back onto, and I didn't feel supported and confident in myself anymore. And that's kind of how I feel. As I said, I feel like there's some truth to it on CLG, but on Curse, when stuff was going good, everyone was happy, everyone was supporting each other. But like the split second we had like a bad or an interrupt, or a player makes a mistake, it was like, you're on the chopping block. You're going to be hearing that over and over and over again, and I take that stuff to heart, and I take it, pretty personally. Saying like, well, call me a quote unquote feeler, but that's just the way I work. I work a million times better when I have a team supporting me. I work, a million times better when a team can match the commitment, and I'm basically just a team player, and if I don't have a team around me that's going to help me improve and help me be the best I can be, then I do again have some issues staying again motivated, but I guess I'm not going to keep on rambling about that. I think I said all what I had to say.
Okay, fair enough. Well, on this topic actually, that ties into something I wanted to talk about, which was, it seems like for you personally, like you were saying before, like having a real sports team environment is like what you think there should be. Like there should be camaraderie, and there should be like the guy who knows how to pick people up, and then you make sure one person isn't picking on another person. This sort of environment seems like it's what you think like ideally a team should be like. Well, when we think of that CLG team, it's a team that gradually split apart because of like infighting and then people just deciding behind someone's back, like, right, that guy's being removed next and we want this guy instead. Was there a degree to which, when we think of the famous stupid vent battles of like Hotshot versus Chauster versus Saintvicious and like a Steel Cage death match in a scrim, it sounded to me always like, okay, those three are always talking, but then Bigfatlp and Elementz to some degree just shut up and play the game, or they just like, they're the more calming influence. Have I characterized it accurately?
I definitely say, yeah. I mean, obviously me and GG had our heated moments as well in that, but for the most part, I'd say you're pretty dead on that.
Do you think that was like an element of the team that helped in any sense? Like if you have these hotheads, you have to have people who are a bit more cool?
Yeah, definitely. Because if you have everybody that's, hot, then everyone's going to be at each other's throat. But if you have everybody that's cold, then nothing's going to get done. You're all going to, sit passively and, like, oh, well, I don't really understand why we lost. Like I think there's a yin and a yang to a good team dynamic, definitely.
What's strange is when people talk about that old CLG team, I saw something incredible, dude. When Chauster retired, in his AMA, someone asked him what the best team he'd played in, and he actually listed the team afterwards, the one that they had to kick Saint out of because they said they couldn't play with him. He actually listed that team and said they had really good synergy and all the like stuff that didn't even make sense if you looked at in the moment of why they kicked people and why they got so mad.
Yeah.
I think that some of those CLG guys, because they didn't have as much success later, they think of that was like the last period where in theory they might have been the best NA team or they could have won. So even despite all the arguments and all the problems, somehow they look back on it fondly. Maybe they can think back differently. How was that team able to do well or even win or do well in games when you were in it? If there was all this arguing all the time and there was people literally arguing in scrims, like not even talking about the game, how could you win in that scenario?
I think it was just because the sheer amount we were playing together and the sheer amount of experience we had. We were the team that was basically like the team before teams even, anybody really gave a shit. So we were the guys, playing the meta the most. We were the guys, playing the most solo queue. We were the guys, just playing the most League of Legends, which is like when, as we talked about, staying motivated and all that stuff, but it's like, in reality, if you can stay motivated, stay confident in your abilities, it doesn't really matter so much about arguing and all that stuff, because as long as you go into game and you know your job and you know what you have to do, you'll pretty much win based off that fact. And that's pretty much why CLG did so good, is just because we outplayed everybody by just playing and knowing how to play the game better than everybody else. It wasn't the fact that we were the best team; we were just the best 5 dudes in the game, I think.
Okay. Well, here's another question along those lines then, which is, everyone assumes because Hotshot owns CLG, the organization, that HotshotGG is in any way the leader of CLG. But like I described there was people just going backwards and forwards at each other. Who do you think, was there one person who had more influence over the team? Like, could Hotshot ultimately decide a roster move or something? Do you think it was democratic? Were there other influences? How do you think it worked around this era?
It was probably more democratic. I don't think Hotshot exactly knew. I mean, esports was so new and all this stuff, and I don't think any of us really knew what the hell we were doing back then. And it was like a group decision for like all the big decisions that CLG made. And I think now Hotshot's taken the reins, especially the fact that he stepped out, because I mean, playing League of Legends, if you want to do it professionally, is probably the most time consuming thing I've ever done in my life. People talk about like working long and all this stuff, but like League of Legends takes so much of your time. It absorbs all your personal life, and you just have to play the game. So as much fun it is just playing like a game, like it has its toll. You have to spend every waking moment, and I think now that Hotshot has stepped out to the side, I think he's able to run CLG the way CLG should have been ran, back when it was, first started.
So another of your teammates from that era, Saint, who obviously you got to play with later in Curse as well.
Yeah,
he's another player who history hasn't been kind to, and partly because of the meme. Like, everyone thinks that Saint has never landed a smite in his entire career, and that he just doesn't even know what he's doing at Baron, just because of like the famous clips. Now, there was a time, from my understanding, when Saintvicious was like one of the maybe the best jungler in NA or something, right? Well, at his prime, when do you think that was, and what was he good at?
I think Saint's prime was definitely one of the early times in CLG. It was back probably I'd say actually season 1. I think going into season 1, I think Saint was an incredibly strong jungler. He knew the meta. He knew that he had his pool of champions. I think he was maining Warwick then and just like dunking everybody in solo queue with it. And I think that's when he was the strongest. Was probably going into season 1 when we played at Worlds. Granted we didn't have the greatest series there, but that's when I think Saint was the strongest.
As someone who actually got to play with him later in Curse, was there a degree to which either his levels just as a player dropped? Do you think his motivation to try and be the best dropped to a degree?
I don't know if that was the case. I think he honestly might have had the same problems I had, where it's it's a confidence thing. When everyone's saying it, it's like, man, is it true? You start to second guess yourself. You start to beat yourself up about stuff, and it's like, it's probably the fact that every time he got to Baron, he's like, fuck, I have to smite this, or like it's going up on Reddit, and that creates a lot of stress, and it creates a lot of stress for pretty much anybody who plays the game, just with the community, because they're gonna jump on you if you mess up, and I think he probably felt the exact same way, the pressures from the community, and I think that's just basically what happened, and why he started to decline.
When you described before, like you thought CLG was just like you guys were just the 5 best at the game in NA at that time, and that's why the team made so much sense. Okay, when people think of you now and they think of like your career on the wind down after, like through to Curse and then to the end, people are going to think, well, he was a support player and he got kicked from some teams or he got benched. So they're going to think that automatically means like you were worse than your teammates or your mechanics were worse or something was worse. That's what they're going to think. Okay, but it sounds like when you were at your peak, you thought of yourself as like, I'm just one of the best players, period. Like I'm one of the best. Is there a degree to which you ever would think yourself through your career, like, okay, I have declined in some area, or maybe mechanically I'm not as good? Was that always overblown, do you think?
No. I mean, the start of my I guess big head was actually back when the CLG days. It's actually when I started on AON with Reginald. Actually, despite everyone saying BM stuff about Reggie or doing anything like that, and all the bad drama he's had over the years, I'll give Reggie one thing, is that he definitely knows how to get people motivated and get people desiring to be the best. Because when I played with Reggie, he would commonly ask me, he's like, do you think you're a top 5 player, and do you want to be, like, he'd always pose the question and make you strive for it, despite the heated fights I had with Reggie and all that stuff back then. But it's just like he does a great job of motivating people, and that's really when I started taking League a lot more seriously, is when I started playing with Reggie, and I was like, yeah, I want to be the best. I know I'm one of the best players in this game, without a doubt. And when you know that and you feel that, you're just automatically going to play better. And I kind of carried that mindset into CLG, but again, as stuff went on, and there wasn't that many big tournaments anymore, and like there's kind of this like a lull period in League of Legends where like nothing was really going on, and I kind of kept that like I'm the best attitude, but I didn't keep up with my play at the same time. So I definitely think I started to decline, and then after CLG and coming back to Curse, after that I did realize I had declined a bit, and that's why I think in season 2 I was playing so much better, and actually carrying the team. I felt like I was carrying Curse when I was in season 2. I felt like I was doing a lot. I felt like I was being a leader. I felt, again, my confidence was coming back, and that's really when I was like, I need to step my game up and start playing better.
It is always a case, just because of how a lot of the best players by default are the best mechanical players, and a lot of their skill is like they outskill someone, they make out players, they did get the one-on-one duel and they beat that guy with mechanics, and that's kind of how people tend to rank people in their minds. But obviously you can have players where they can have a huge impact on their game just by maybe they're tactically really clever, or maybe as a team player, okay, a good example for a support player, maybe they can just support one particularly really good AD carry so well that he becomes the beast, okay. What do you think you brought to the game outside of just like skill? What are the best qualities of Elementz in his prime and throughout his career, do you think?
Well, on CLG again, like we talked about not really having like one person leading the team and one person shot calling. Generally, I feel like I bring a good positive attitude, I'll say, to a team. When stuff's not going the best, I usually try to keep up. I look for the stuff. I look for the ways we can get back into the game, little calls and stuff like that. I feel like I was a great like secondary shot caller. I think that was honestly my strongest strength, and why me and Saint worked so well together when we did work well together is because I would just basically like shoot out questions at Saint, like you basically just suggestion after suggestion, be like, yo, like this is up, want to do this? Do you want to go to blue? Dragon's coming up. Do we want to rotate top, kind of stuff? And he'd just be like, yeah. And like, like he would just decide all that stuff for us. So I feel like he was a great like early game shot caller, and then it would kind of transition into like me and him kind of like pushing our way and deciding on what to do. But I guess I would say my greatest strength, besides my mechanics back when I was really really good at this game, was probably just my awareness and my shot calling, I'd say.
When you describe kind of like the synergy between you and Saint there, it's obvious, like, since you were in CLG together and then you were the two who went to Curse afterwards, that people are going to link the two of you. Now, what's strange is you played in two successful teams together, and then people just remember the end, which was like this famous outburst on the cams that were in the Curse house. Like, thanks to the Curse house for putting those up. And so this famous argument where Saint obviously is drunk. He's like slurring his fucking words, and you're just sort of telling him like, "You're drunk, shut up, go away." And he's saying probably the most hilarious sort of quip I've ever heard, which is like, "I'll get Locust in here right now," which is like, Jesus, of all the people you're going to say you're going to place someone with, like, it's not like Mad Life or something, you know? Like, and so the reason why this is a crazy ending is because that would make it seem like, okay, actually, Elementz and Saint don't get along at all. You know, they have totally different views on the game and professionalism and stuff. It sounds like when it was working well, it worked really well. So what do you think the relationship was like there?
I mean, I don't know. Me and Saint were like great friends, but at the same time, like greatest enemies. I don't really know how to describe. Me and him had like a really interesting relationship, I'd say, because like, you know, as like a team environment, you know, we would butt heads a lot of the time, because Saint had a huge issue with just like not letting, you know, the famous hotshot. I let it go. I let it go. You know, Saint kind of had like the same thing. He wouldn't drop something. He wouldn't, you know, like if you had messed up, he would let you know for like the next 2 days that you messed up, and it's like, shit, dude, like I get it, like back the fuck off already, right? And a lot of times he would do that with other people, and then I would step in and you're like, yo, like blah blah blah, well, here are your issues, you know, this is where you screwed up, this is where you screwed up. And you know, I would try to defend teams or teammates rather, and then we just end up butting heads. And you know, instead of talking about anything that actually mattered in the game anymore, we're personally insulting each other and just, you know, got into this big, basically that's what would happen all the time. And it just like, you know, we'd constantly be butting heads about the, you know, eventually just like the dumbest shit that didn't even matter, and you know, ended up not liking each other. But like that was just like the in-game stuff. Like out of game, you know, we were friends, go to the gym together, go drinking together, you know, party together, and it was all good. It's just, you know, in the team environment, we just ended up not clicking anymore. We just had too many issues that we needed, I feel like we need, you know, not to say anything against Liquid, but I feel like someone needed to step in and like really just like sit everybody down and just like kind of lay down the law of how the team should work and how people are going to talk to each other. Because, you know, esports is just so young that I feel so many of these big, you know, valuable, like, I guess I won't say big and valuable, just like the team dynamic and stuff like that. It's just not there. I come from a sports background of soccer and lacrosse, and I played that stuff for like 18 years of my life, and I've always been taught, you know, like even the guys I hated on my teams, I always supported them, you know, hit them on the back of the head when I score a goal or something, hit them on the back, you know, like, you know, say good job, you know, always support your teammates. And I feel like in esports, it's just not there. It's almost non-existent.
How do you think it is instead?
Well, I mean, I can't say that for every team because, well, I'll segue into C9 for a second here. So C9 was like this awful team. Like, I don't think when I played, I ever lost like a bot lane to Lemon Nation, and I can't remember whose AD was, right? Like, it was just, we were just way better than them. But these guys stuck together, supported each other, never ever like, they just didn't fight. They just worked. They just wanted to be better. They wanted to be the best. They were the guys coming up that just strive to be number one, and they just stuck together. They worked all their stuff out. They are just a great team that has worked their way up into the number one spot. And I can say the exact same thing for Gambit in their prime over the 4 years that they had, is this, they were just the best team. They weren't a bunch of individuals. They were an actual team who supported each other. You know, when people make comments about them, they would be there to back them up. And it's a great feeling when you're on a team to have somebody, you know, that's going to have your back. But it's like when you go to the Reddit and like everyone's bashing everybody, and then like all this, like it's like a free for all. Everyone's getting, you know, just like ridiculed and all this stuff, and then you see your own teammates doing the exact same thing. It's like, well, shit, you know, like this sucks. And I really feel like the greatest you know, teams in League of Legends right now are the real teams. They're the teams who actually give a shit. They're the teams that support each other. They're teams that are like, hey man, like here's some constructive criticism without, you know, calling you a bunch of curse words all at once, you know, at the same time. And that's really just like how I feel about League of Legends as a whole. Is it's just so new that all these people and all these players and all these managers just don't really understand how to grow a team and how to be successful yet.
Because one of the strange things along these lines I always noticed when I looked back through the NA history is, okay, so those initial teams that were like the CLG type era teams, back then when there was no meta and you basically just played your position and you played whatever champ you wanted, it makes sense then why you would just stack an all-star team together, because you just want people who are just going to win their lane completely and just wreck the other guy 1v1, right? Yeah. Well, later on, when the team aspect comes in, I feel like one area that gets overlooked as to why NA fell behind a bit was that people still had the mentality of like, we always want to upgrade at every position. Like, let's get a more skilled player at that position. Let's get a more skilled player here. Whereas there's the team aspect. Obviously, sometimes you need a supportive player, not a support player necessarily, who maybe is less skilled, but he works better with someone, or he brings some other quality here, or he's a tactician, or he's a shot caller, but his skills aren't crazy. Do you think NA in any way ever got behind in that sense, or they didn't value those qualities?
I definitely think that. I mean, because again, you even look at like TSM, they've had like three roster changes now. It's like the teams that just stay together and stick it out and just work through their problems and are the teams that have had the most success. The teams that constantly change their roster and constantly do all this other stuff are the teams that fall behind for the most part when we look at who's winning the competitive ladder. And you can look again across the globe at EU and the Korea and Chinese teams. It's like, it feels like the teams that just like stick it out and work together. Like that's when TPA again like won. They were a team forever together. I remember playing them in like San Francisco in season 2, and then they ended up winning it all. It's just like, man, that team won. It's like, well, why? Because they just stuck it out. They worked hard. They supported each other, and they really wanted to win.
Of all the teams you were in, if we could go back in time and apply that logic, like we'll sit everyone down, and I have like some futuristic laser, I'm going to point it at Saint's head, like you can't make a roster change or blow your fucking head off. Like, which of your teams that you played on, if we could just make them stick together and everyone just shut the fuck up and play properly, which would be like the best of all the ones you were on, do you think?
I'd probably say CLG. I think CLG by far had the best mechanics of a team I played on, and just like game knowledge and what to do. And again, it was just like, no one could get on the same page. This is basically why CLG failed. But I definitely think CLG would be the best team. Would still be a fantastic team if we all played together, if everyone could just, get along.
When you went to Curse, one of the strange things about the Curse history is that I remember when the team where you first joined was one, like, it wasn't at the level of a CLG and TSM. Okay, it had to be built up a bit. It was maybe like the 4th or 5th best team. And the funny thing is, the storyline of season 2 for most people was just like, TSM wins everything in NA, and then CLG want to believe they're as good as TSM, and they just fall short each time. People think it's just these two teams. But I noticed when I went and watched all the games I could, and I looked at even just online cups every week, what's funny is the team who actually gave TSM the best rivalry was Curse. Like, you might not have been the second best team, but you guys won tons of cup games over them. You were close in all the LAN games. Why do you think your matchup versus TSM was good when everyone else was having such problems, getting blown out?
I'm not sure exactly. I know for a while, my fiddlesticks was just like X-Special just didn't even know what to do, but they just wouldn't ban it from me. And that's when fiddlesticks was kind of on the OP side again too. And I don't know, me and Comp would just like decimate bot lane, it felt like, and we just kind of like snowball from there. But as we progressed, I think they started to catch on a lot of times and what we were going to do. But again, I'm not going to say it was all just me, I played OP champions and we won the game. Obviously I think we just had a good dynamic, and they were the number 1 team. So I think Curse did a great job of stepping up to the teams we were playing, because I also think that's what Curse, kind of why we lost and didn't do that great either, is because like versus the crappy teams we'd play to their level, and versus the good teams we'd play to them. So it was like this weird mix of like perpetually being 4th place we do good versus good teams and then get dunked by the lower teams, and it's just this weird kind of mentality on the team.
When you think of that era of League of Legends, how tactical was it in NA, do you think, in like season 2 era? Like, how much actual focus actually went into what the other guy's going to do and what champions does he play? How much was just your own stuff?
I think quite a bit. That's season 2, I'd say, was when NA's wake up call after season 1. We're like, man, we got dumpsteed. Like, we really need to step our game up, and that's when I think a lot of organizations started getting bigger in the league, and I think that season 2 was kind of like the initial like start of North America's like actual esports you know, actually caring and actually looking, watching replays, you know, going over what you did wrong, what the other team does good, you know, the picks, the bans. That's really when everything, I think, started getting serious.
I've got an analogy to set up a question about Cop for you, because he's such a person that's so misunderstood. Okay, so in mixed martial arts, because every fight has to start standing up facing each other, so initially you're going to punch someone first. If you're a really terrible boxer or striker, then initially people are going to think you're not a very good fighter, because every fight starts that way. So if you're some like jiu-jitsu guy, you're going to have to get into a position where you can do that. Well, I think the reason why Cop has such a bad reputation, why people think he should be replaced, or they've always called him like a weak spot on Curse, is because like his laning at times is suspect, or it's not at the level of some of the amazing AD carries.
Yeah.
What are the strengths of Cop? What can he be really good at? And what is like a reasonable evaluation of his skills? Because you partnered with him for a while. Obviously, he's not the best player, and he can't be the worst. So whereabouts is he? What is he good at? And what are his strengths and weaknesses, do you think?
I actually think Cop is terribly underrated in this scene, and only because like I actually think your analogy is pretty spot on, because Cop doesn't really excel at like, you know, like the laning phase, like the stand up, you know, fight starts. That's not, you know, Cop's not, you know, a crazy amazing laner. He likes to play passively. He just likes to farm up. He just likes, you know, to sit there and get strong and carry himself into the mid game. And if you have a support that's going to make plays for him, he's amazing at following up. And that's actually why I think Xpecial and him are going to do a really, really good job this season, or this next split, because Xpecial is a playmaker and Cop is fantastic at following up. And as you talked about before, you know, having like a great support makes a, you know, a great AD carry. I kind of feel like that's what's going to happen with them. I feel like Cop's going to be shining, you know, way more than he would previous seasons, because I think Xpecial and him are just going to have a fantastic synergy. But to go even further on that, I feel like Cop's strength is just the fact that he's just so incredibly consistent. Like, you know, people are always like, oh my God, the double lift mechanics. Oh, they're like, oh my, it's so godly. Senpai, you know, like, and it's just like, okay, well, then I watched the next game after he, you know, double lift just went 12-0 and carried the shit out of CLG. Next game, he just walked into lane, face tanked like 4 brushes in a row and lost them the game. Cop is never going to do that. Cop is never going to have this incredible, you know, here to here, you know, back and forth split. Cop's always going to be here, and if you have a team that supports Cop, he's only going to get stronger as the game goes on. And that's how I feel Cop is one of the strongest AD carries actually in North America right now.
When Curse... Okay, here, I'll set the scene like this. So when I said before about, like, even if Curse had the really good rivalry with TSM, it's like the joke, you would always come fourth. Like, you could never crack the, like, top 3 consistently. Well, then LCS starts, and what's funny is you're the only team out of the top 4, because you finished 4th at regionals, who don't get to automatic spot. You have to actually qualify, and so, you know, you guys go into the regional the qualifier thing, you get into LCS, but then suddenly it's like the switch gets flipped, and then you guys are just winning every game. I think you went like 8-0 or something to start the season. Like you were dominating the whole league. You were at something crazy like 18-2 at one point or something ridiculous. Yeah. How could you be going so crazy? And it's like, wow, finally, you know, we're on top. We're the best now. We're going to win the whole split. Was that really like what happened, that it was up here and then suddenly off a cliff at the end?
So yeah, I think what happened was the reason we were doing so good early and why we had so much success early on is because I think CLG, TSM, and Dignitas, which was, you know, the big 3 back then, still kind of big 3, but they didn't have to earn their way into the LCS because they had already earned it, you know, via the Season 2 North American qualifier or whatever championships to get into Worlds that year. So we had to go back through the challenger scene, go through relegations, and come all the way back through. Well, those 3 teams were just like, you know, like whatever, like it's just like, yeah, woo, LCS, let's play it when it comes up. And we were the team that was in the trenches like every 12 hours a day. Like Liquid was just breaking our balls, just like, let's go League of Legends. And we were the team that just mastered the meta. We knew exactly what we wanted to pick, and we were just, I think, above the teams in terms of knowledge and understanding of how the game should be played for those, you know, let's say first month and a half of the LCS, is because we were just the team that just knew more and we're working harder than those guys. That's really why we had so much success in that split. And the reason why I guess it fell off is it just became unbearable for myself to live in Vegas anymore. We like stuff in LA was going really good. We had our issues, you know, back and forth, and they were all fine. But moving to Vegas was just an awful experience, I'd say, for myself. I wasn't really in a good place. I was getting a lot of flack from like teammates and stuff like that, and you know, I was just generally like really unhappy and kind of getting to the point where I was like depressed, having to live in Vegas and having to live in the team house with all those guys, because Curse kind of denied any personal life per se. It was you know, like either you're working or you're like playing solo queue, like that's what you're gonna do, and I couldn't do that much anymore. I couldn't, you know, be, you know, I don't want to say anything like too bad, but like basically I was getting shit on by my teammates daily, and that was just like ruining my confidence. And then I wasn't able to have a personal life and, you know, see my girlfriend at the time. I wasn't allowed to go see her and stuff like that. And it's just like it all just came up to, you know, overwhelmed myself, and it was just a really, you know, bad environment for a team, I'd say, that was going on at that time. And it was mostly because, you know, as I said before in this, me and Saint would just butt heads about something. We'd pick fights with each other about, you know, random stuff, and it'd just go into screaming matches. And it's just like, no one's happy when you're having a screaming match with somebody you're supposed to work and live with every single day, you know? Like, oh, I just, you know, shit talked this guy for the last half an hour. Now I have to go like sit on the same couch with him and watch a movie or something like that. You know, it just doesn't really work anymore at that point. And that's kind of what happened at Curse. Is like it hit this boiling point where it's just like I couldn't take this shit anymore. I was done with it, and I wanted out, and that's really it. That's kind of how I see the end of Curse right there.
One of the strange things is, for example, when I talked to Sint about this issue, I would have thought he would like play along with the question. He'd be like, oh yeah, well, we were doing so awesome. So, you know, like maybe if Elementz had stayed, or maybe if we'd done something different, we could have like delivered on the promise of that season and won the whole split, you know. But he makes it sound like, nah, it was all, you know, kicking Elementz or whatever wasn't even a big deal. Like it had to end eventually, like, and we would have lost the season anyway. He makes it sound almost like there's nothing could have been done differently. If the team was really like whatever it was, 19-2 or something ridiculous, if we went back in time now, are there some simple things that could be changed, or one general thing that would make it so you could have still finished top two, or it could have worked? Was it always destined to fall apart?
I don't think it was destined to fall apart. Again, I think the reason the team fell apart is, honestly, as I said before, is that esports is just so new, and these are people that come from different backgrounds. They don't understand team aspects and how to treat each other and how to make yourselves improve, how to, you know, improve each other, and how to, you know, keep the morale high, because I think people underestimate how much morale means on a team. Like if you're going in and you're like, man, everyone thinks I'm shit, the community thinks I'm shit, my team thinks I'm shit, I'm probably shit. If you go into a game and you're like, man, these guys got my back, we're all gonna shit. We're gonna shit on these guys. We're gonna do this. This is our plan. We're going in. We're confident. Everyone's got my back. You know, like that's really when you feel the best. And when I've won anything in my life, from esports to just sports in general, it's always been when the team has come together and been like, yeah, we can do it. You know, like when everyone's pumped up and supporting each other, I really truly feel that's the absolute key to success in any kind of group setting, whether it be sports to whatever you're doing in your life. And I totally think Curse was, you know, great back then, and I think we could have easily, because we had such a great split in season 2, and we were coming into LCS season 3 like so hot. We were doing so good, and you know what? We hit it. We lost a couple of games, and then it was just like this little hiccup. But that hiccup was like, oh, like this is the word, like we're losing 2 games in a row, like this is unacceptable. And it was like, you know, or you don't have to blow it up to this huge thing. We can just work on it, go back to the drawing board and work to get better. But I feel like the negatives were so, you know, focused on that there was just nothing else to do. You just couldn't move forward. We couldn't progress as a team, and we couldn't get better because the only thing we would focus on is the negatives. We would never be like, okay, here's our next plan and here's what we can do. You know, like whatever, let's just forget about that game and let's move on. It was like, here's where you messed up. Here's where you do this. You. Like everyone was just pointing finger at everybody. And it was just, you know, like this really just you know, he said, she said, you know, tattletale. It was just honestly, it was just a terrible environment for any team. That's why the team fell apart, is because we stopped being a team. That's really when I think about it, was we just stopped being a team. We stopped supporting each other. We stopped, you know, caring as much about each other. And it more so came down to, it's his job versus mine. It wasn't like we're a team of 5 dudes who plays video game. It's like, okay, if I don't do good and this guy doesn't do good, then his job's going to go, my job's going to go. And, you know, that's really what it came down to, I think.
So there's a weird anecdote that I heard, which sounds like it links into this maybe. So maybe that's what you can confirm. So you remember that famous scenario where for like a week, you guys just practice CLG over and over and over and over. And they beat you like 12-0 or something ridiculous in this like span of like a week and a half or something, I remember. And the funny thing was, I remember initially the story I first heard was like, oh, the reason CLG won all those games is because Cop wasn't doing that well in bot lane. So Curse purposely forced it like, okay, we're just going to force you without like jungle help. You're going to just go 2v2 every time versus, in theory, like double lift and no, it was Afro at the time, yeah. So you're going to go versus those as the bot, and the idea is we're going to make Cop play better because he's going to be forced to like up his level, you know, versus the best AD. Yeah. Now that actually sounds like a really smart plan. That's like, wow, that's actually like a level ahead of most teams, because a lot of teams still try to win the scrim, you know. They don't want to actually drill the things they need to practice at. But since right after that is when things went completely to shit with the team and then people got kicked, did that even play a role in it, dude? Please tell me it didn't.
I don't think so. I mean, I feel like, I don't know. It was like a weird decision to me in my mind, because, basically what CLG would do is also, because they viewed us as the weakest lane too. So the jungler would just like sit there, like no matter what, like they'd just be in the lane, getting kills, getting double F fed. And it's just like, well, we can't do anything. And because of that, you know, mindset, Saint was like, well, I'm not coming down there. You guys are just on your own. And it's like, well, we physically and literally cannot 3v2 no matter what, and like we're already struggling 2v2. So it's like, again, it goes back to like my perspective is like, you should just support your team no matter what, you know. Like granted, that's a good practice style, but it's like when, you know, push comes to shove, you need to, again, support your teammates in game and out of it.
When you think of the period when they made the move and they took rocks and they went into the playoffs and they did quite badly, do you think that what was there an element to which, like, if you're Rocks, like there's nothing you can do there. You've only been in the team for a week and then you have to literally play support and play in the playoffs. Could their team, do you think that the problems they had with Rocks in the playoffs were the same problems they already had when you were in the team?
No, I mean, the Rux thing was, you know, like I had offered and said, you know, like I was totally down to finish the season. But Liquid was like, well, if we're going to use a new support anyways, then it's like, may as well just like use Rux and like get more practice in anyways. Cause I think they also assumed that they were going to like do half decently. And then, you know, they just, you know, it just went way worse than I guess anyone expected. But I don't think that. I think, you know, throwing a top laner into a support position that, you know, like I think the issue was because, you know, like I think they assumed support was just like this really easy role, and it's just like, yeah, fucking anybody can support. You know, let's just throw Rux down there. You know, he smashes top lane all the time on our, you know, Curse Academy team. He can obviously just support, and it's like the guy's just like, well, I don't know what to do. You know, like I've never played this competitively, because playing the game competitively at a level where you have to work with the team versus smashing your lane and solo queue is like, so it's night and day difference. Like people don't understand how vastly different competitive play is compared to just your regular day solo queue stuff. And I think that's where that problem, you know, consisted, was because, you know, Rux literally did nothing. Like when we watch those games, you know, no offense to Rux, and like he's not even a support player. It's like you throw a guy and you expected him to do amazing when he doesn't even play the role. Like honestly, it's just asinine when you really think about it.
So this is actually kind of going back to that topic I said before about people tending to, if they're really skilled players, they only tend to value skill as like the metric of what makes you good. And so I've noticed in NA, the top teams in NA, so particularly CLG and now Curse, don't seem to have a lot of respect for the support position, because for a start off, they all seem to think if they're like solo laners that they could just play support. They think like support's like, you know, when you're a kid and you play football, like whoever's like the worst player has to be the goalkeeper or something, you know, because who the fuck wants to do that? They think it's like that. They think it's like, well, if I'm the striker, of course I could play goalkeeper. Like But
Yeah.
apparently it's a more subtle role than that it takes. Because we've even seen Saint now try to be a support player. Like, what do you think these players aren't appreciating about the role? What do you think's more subtle about support that people don't see if they're just looking at kills and stuff?
Well, to expand on your point, I think in season 1 and 2, support was a role that was less impactful to the game, was less important. But Riot has also realized that, and through the game and how it's changed, support has become, I think, one of the most important and impactful roles in the game now for competitive standings, because it's like right now it's like AD carries are kind of somewhat, we'll say, not as as powerful as they were in the previous seasons. So what they need and what you need to do to scale into a later game is to have an AD carry that can actually do anything. And if you're not supporting your guy and you're not helping him get the CS under tower, you're not doing all the min max, getting your wards out, making sure he's safe and all that, positioning, staying by him and all that, all the stuff that comes with support. If you're not doing all those little things all at once, then, your AD carry is going to get farther and farther behind. You're going to have a harder and harder time mid game. And then because you don't have anybody that's fed that can carry and just dish out that consistent damage that an AD carry can do, you're kind of hooped coming into the mid game. And I kind of feel like that's something that a lot of teams still underrate about the support, is that you need your AD carry to be able to dish out that consistent damage, or these team fights are just going to swing, the opposite direction. And what was the other question you had besides in that?
Just basically about every other player you've played with apparently thinks that they can just be a support player.
Yeah, just I guess on the support side of things, it's just, support is an impactful role. Support is definitely a role that takes practice, takes time, because it's not like any other roles in the game. You're like, hey, you're going to do all this stuff with a quarter of the gold, and you have to be just as efficient as everybody else and stay in the levels and stay all this stuff. And it's like, and that's also another thing. Supports are always under leveled by at least 3 or 4 levels, because they just don't get the experience. They're always in a duo lane. They never get solo. So it's like, you got to be good at playing the squishy, under leveled, under golded champion and not die, not get caught. And it's like, it's really I guess I don't know which word to describe it, but it's just a very you have to be very aware of everything on support, because if you're not, you get punished incredibly hard if you die. You get punished incredibly hard if you get caught, because it just makes it that much harder to catch up and be effective.
Who were the supports who you found the most impressive at any time in history? Who are the ones who really stood out, they embodied all these qualities,
I definitely had a huge respect for Edward. Back, I'd probably say, season 1, season 2, season 3, Edward really impressed me. I think he was a fantastic support, and he did, crazy plays all the time. I was just like, man, that guy's just incredibly good. I actually think Special and Patoy are the 2 other supports in North America I gave a lot of credit to, and was like, these guys are good. I have a hard time laning versus these guys, and it's just, I just was generally impressed by what they brought to the table.
When the thing happened with Curse at the end of that first split, you were saying there some of the personal things that you had going on in your life, you didn't want to live in Vegas anymore, and you were maybe burned out of the game, or the negative attitude. Did you really consider why don't I just take one of these challenger teams or one of these lower LCS? Why don't I just jump back in again, but with a different team? Maybe I can get a team where, because I'm a veteran, they'll respect me more or something. Did you never just want to jump right back in and try and get back up again?
Well, what happened with me after I left Curse is I was just so burned out. I was at the point where I was like, I hate League of Legends. I hate everything about this, and I'm just done. I'm taking a break. I don't even want to think about the words League of Legends, and I honestly didn't even cross my mind until a while ago that after coaching Coast, that I was like, man, I really wanted to play again, and it kind of brought back my desire. But in that kind of period after I left Curse, it was just like I just didn't want to do anything League of Legends, and I kind of feel like I screwed myself a little bit. I should have jumped right back on the bandwagon after that and got a team together and tried my best to requalify, because what I've realized is that I just need a team that works well with me. I need a team that I'm like, this guy, I can say something to him, he's not going to take it personally. Getting 4 other people that can respect each other, can take constructive feedback and aren't going to be, you know, hot-heads and, you know, blow up on anybody or rage at people. And I kind of regret not doing that sooner.
Well, since that was a similar kind of period of time, right? Actually, when Chaos had gotten kicked from TSM a little bit before that, and I actually had a conversation with him before the next split started, and I was asking him, like, are you going to join another team? Like, why don't you want to join one or whatever? And he was telling me, like, the way he described it made a lot of sense at the time based on what we knew about League of Legends, which was like, oh, there's no point joining like a lower team because if I've been in TSM, how could any of those teams ever be as good? Like, you know, they're not going to have the players to be as good. They don't have the experience. There's no way they're going to qualify for Worlds within another split. And obviously at the time, you couldn't know that like Vulcan and Cloud9 were just sitting there like ready to go crazy. But he had a point at the time, you know, I understood what he meant. But now we do know that Cloud9 and Vulcan were waiting there and all these other challenger players were waiting to get their chance, you know. Knowing what you know now, you would like join another team or you'd look for one of those teams that you could be a valuable part in, right?
Oh, definitely. I regret that all the time. I actually regret not making my own organization and doing kind of what Hotshot did. If I could go back in time, that's definitely what I would do. I would just peace out on CLG, take the fame with me, and just roll with a new organization that I could, you know, be a part of and work with and generally just grow.
Okay, actually, on that topic, you own Reign of Gaming, right?
I used to. I had sold it to Curse. And just after I joined Curse, after leaving CLG, I sold Reign of Gaming to Curse.
On this topic, like, is that something, if you could go back in time, would you make the same decision again? I mean, from what I can see, people didn't know at the time, but any sort of entity you had in the early days of League, if you can hold on to them, then in theory they could become much more valuable, right? Nowadays. Yeah,
definitely. I to a degree, I regret selling Reign Gaming. I mean, there's been perks, obviously, but for where I am right now, I wish I had not sold Reign Gaming and I had done more with it when I really think, you know, what I could have done with it and what the potential was. But I was, you know, an idiot 22-year-old, not knowing, you know, up from down. So I learned a lot of hard lessons, and just kind of got to keep on trucking on, I guess.
Okay, when people saw that you were the coach of Coast, okay, people are going to wonder, what does that actually mean? Because of all the teams to be the coach of, you don't want to be the coach of the team who's like throwing all the leads and then they're doing well in the early game and then they're blowing it here. Like, how much of this was like, were any of these your own difficulties getting to grasp of being a coach? How would you explain it for someone who on the outside's going to do like for example, you know, when Monty first took over CLG and they had like an identical season, they didn't do any better, so people were like, well, what did he even do? You know, he did nothing. But obviously next season, now he did really well, so now he gets all the credit. Like, how do you weigh up your influence on Coast and how much was like things you couldn't control?
With Coast, it was kind of like, I saw this interesting thread on Reddit the other day talking about how, you know, one of the biggest reasons North America, I think it was a Korean player talking about this, reason the North American players is because they don't have a hierarchy of who they're supposed to listen to. You know, it's not like, you know, you listen to your manager, you listen to your coach, and we're the players. It's the players are the kings, coach is secondary. And I think that was the biggest issue with Coast, is that they thought they knew better than me. And I'm not saying I knew everything or whatever, but I would spend the time to go through all the pick and bans that we could, you know, possibly think of, you know, say, this is the strategy to beat this team, and these are the champions you guys should pick because these are the ones you're strongest with. And you know, they'd go into pick and ban phase and they'd pick completely different champions than what we planned the last week for picking. And I'm just like, well, how do I, you know, I can't. Coaches are not in League of Legends. You know, they're not like sports. You can't. There's not like a coach being like, "Oh yeah, you do this," or, you know, ward here, or no, you should buy that. You know, don't do that. They're not an actual part of the team. Like, you are, but you aren't. So it's way more difficult to get what you want done on a team when they don't 100% value your opinion as, you know, what, you know, which is exactly what to do, and B, when, you know, you can't actually be there to help them and teach them, you know, why in the moment. I think those are two biggest things that kind of like stopped me from making Coast the team I knew they could be, because they all had a lot of good potential. I think it was just more so them kind of like beating themselves and not wanting to listen to somebody else.
So one of the players on Coast who got a lot of praise this split was Shifter. And people, but unfortunately, it's like to praise him, it would always be a backhanded compliment. People would say, wow, that guy is amazing. It's like he 1v9s the game, which is sort of like saying his teammates are terrible, they're holding him back. Like, how can you reasonably tell us about what Shifter's good and what he's bad? Because I've noticed, actually, some of the more, let's say, refined people who look at the game, some of them say that maybe he gets praised too much even, because sometimes maybe he plays more of a safe style, or he didn't put himself out there to die in a way that maybe you might have won a couple more games even if you looked worse. Is there anything to either of these things? Is he really good? Does he have any problems? What do you think?
I think Shifter is probably one of the best, if not one of the best mechanical mids that I've seen just in any region. I think he's incredibly good. He's incredibly knowledgeable, and he's just overall, I think, a fantastic mid lane player. I think where his issue lies are probably communication, and I think that's pretty much it. It's probably just his communication, and as we see, he's posted on Twitter and stuff like that. He likes to beat himself up a lot and take a lot of the onus onto himself, which he shouldn't be doing, because it's a team game and you need to be able to fall back onto your 4 teammates. And if you're not able to do that, you're gonna beat yourself up and literally just beat yourself from being the player he knows he can be. I think if Shifter was able to be on a team, possibly Dignitas now, that's going to support him and help carry the burden of the team. I think we're going to see Shifter take off even more so than we saw him do that on Coast. I really don't have anything bad to say about the guy. I think he's very committed. He wants to work hard, and that's really about it.
So the other star of Coast was ZionSpartan, who obviously has been around a long time. The problem with him is he would have that game every 4 games or so where he'd look, wow, this guy's really good, like he's carrying the game. But then when he would have the games where he couldn't carry, or maybe he'd even just feed, people, the perception, at least in the public, I've seen this repeated a lot of times, whether it's true or not, is like he had the mentality that he had to carry. Like he was stubborn and he was going to play that champion no matter what the matter what. He was going to carry the game. You were his coach. Was there any truth to this? Is this like something about his game?
I'd say that's pretty spot on. And it's almost kind of like somewhat Shifter had the same sort of issues. It's just like you got to know your place sometimes. I think everybody in League of Legends takes their turn carrying the team, and if you can't do that, if you can't let somebody else carry you and be just a member on the team doing your role, like if you get behind in top lane, like you're usually like that 1 kill advantage is just like, well, lane's over. And and I think he's the type of player that's like, I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna flash ward here, do this, auto ignite, and it's just gonna be amazing, and I'm gonna do it. And he believes in himself, but then it just doesn't work out, and it just gets farther and farther behind. And again, that's like a great quality if you're ahead, but you have to change your mindset when you're behind, and I feel like that's probably his biggest issue, is that he has issues changing his mindset to be more of like, okay, I'm behind, I just need to farm on tower. Okay, they're they're probably going to dive me, I should back up. He doesn't make those, or at least when I was on Coast, he didn't make those decisions for himself. He always wanted to be the guy carrying.
Is it true that he was the shot caller?
I'd say it's probably him and Intendude who did a lot of the shot calling on the team, just in general. I wouldn't say he's the sole shot caller. I'd probably say it was. We didn't really have a sole shot caller. It was kind of like a CLG-esque, like everybody kind of put in their input.
Right. Well, because people have repeated since he's gone to Dignitas that he was the shot caller. So in that sense, that actually seems like more of a knock on him, because people are thinking, well, if they threw all these games and then he was blowing it, and he's shot calling as well, it makes it sound really bad. Like, yeah. If it was more of a democratic process, what do you think the problems with shot calling were on Coast? Because obviously there were a lot of thrown games, or games where you just made a fatal flaw at the end,
Yeah, I'd probably say the fatal the issues with shot calling is again just not really having a defined person to be the one all. Like I think it's fine to have everybody put in input, but like one person has to say yes or no, and you have to act on that. If you spend 30 seconds discussing what to do in a competitive esports game, like you know yourself, it's like, well, you probably just wasted a lot of time, and you probably just wasted, a lot of time you guys could have been, farming or taking dragon or doing something productive. And I feel like they got a lot of the times they would, be second guessing themselves or not really knowing what to do at what point in the game.
If you had to explain to me the upside and the downside of Nintendo X, how would you do it? Because I've actually seen this season both sides happen okay. So when he had those amazing prediction flash plays, people were like, wow, look how great that clip is. Look at the mechanics. Prediction, it's amazing. But then everyone looked at the number of deaths in the season. They were like, he must be the fucking worst player ever. Like, what are the reasonable like upsides and downsides to Nintendo?
I think he's kind of a player like I think him and ZionSpartan are two peas in a pod. They have like the same kind of mentality, I think. And Josh, does have these, great plays, and you're like, wow, he's doing so good. And then, some games he just is like outright carries the team. And then sometimes he's just like, well, why are you trying to force that? Or why are you trying to do this? And I think it's kind of like him and ZionSpartan they're both just stubborn players. And I think they will get better if they keep playing and they keep maturing, and as they age, they'll start to understand more of what we mean. And I think it's a lot of the cases of these guys are just young and they don't know how to work with teammates, and they're not used to people telling them what to do. When him and ZionSpartan had the team together like over like 6 different organizations for like when I started in the league, they were like 13 or something like that, 13, 14-year-olds playing, professional League of Legends, and they've had a lot to grow up into, and they've done pretty good for themselves. But I think the biggest issue, I'd say, is just they just got to know, when to go in, what to do, and that's just really a maturing process, though. It's just coming down to not beating yourself up, not trying to be the end-all be-all person on a team, and just doing your part and knowing how to do it.
Is there a player who plays now in any region who plays League of Legends the way Elementz played it, or at his best played it? Is that guy out there?
I don't know how I would describe myself, because honestly, like even on the CLG days when I like knew I was the best, I felt like I wasn't that good. I didn't feel like I was like the best player on CLG, or I was even like a great player in like League of Legends overall, because again, like as I said, I'm a person who takes shit to heart, and that's my issue. I take stuff too much, and it affects me and it affects my gameplay. So I can't really say who would play like me, because I didn't think I was like better or I honestly, I don't really know. I can't say. I don't know any player that play like me.
Okay, for our last question, to be like a bit lighthearted, the scenario is someone comes to Elementz and they've watched this interview and they go, you know what? Like, I mean, that British guy was a bit boring, but this is the makings of a great movie here, man. Like, if we can put this movie together, this is going to be the shit. It's got the drama, it's got the betrayal, the ups, the downs, the throws. It's got everything, So what they want to do is they want to cast the CLG lineup that you were a part of. The classic, back as the rock and roll CLG. And so obviously they're going to, they've already got Liam Neeson secured for your position, okay? He's going to play Elementz, but they need to know, who else do you want in this movie? Who's going to play Saint? Who's going to play Hotshot? Which actor are we going to go with here, Elementz?
Oh my God.
Who could pull it off?
Who could pull it off? I'll give, oh my gosh. I don't even know right now. This is throwing me a curveball. We'll just for comedy's sake, we'll say oh my God, I'm spacing on this name so bad right now.
What movies? I'll see if I can tell you. Which player is it for?
The 2.5 Men main actor. What is his name again? Charlie Sheen. We'll say Charlie Sheen for Saint. And then,
why?
Just because of the ridiculousness and the stuff that happened, and we'll just say the drinking.
Okay.
It's the only thing I can come up with. Hotshot. We'll go with like. Oh my gosh, I have like all their faces in my mind.
Yeah, just tell me the movies. I'll tell you the actor.
Have you seen The Pianist?
Adrian Brody.
Yeah, Adrian Brody for Hotshot.
Okay. Spitting Image.
Yeah, we'll go with that one. Kobe. We'll go with what's Stifler's name in American? What's his
Sean something other, isn't it? It's
Sean,
like a triple barrel name or something.
Yeah, we'll go with him for Kobe. And Chowster and Gigi. I don't even know. Chowster and Gigi. Who would we do good for them? Oh God, I'm just ruining this. This is the worst question ever. You're ruining me here. I'm putting way too much thought into it. I honestly have no idea. I can't even say. I'm drawing a blank here.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm failing. I'm a failure.
No, I think the first two were good. I mean, I want to see what people think of Charlie Sheen for Saintvicious. Okay.
I just went with something funny.
Okay, to wrap things up, do you have anyone you want to thank or say hello to at the end?
Yeah, I'd actually like to, thank you for giving me this interview and talking about all this stuff. I think this is a long time coming for me and you. We've been talking about doing this for a while, so thanks for finally doing it. I'd like to thank, obviously friends and family for keeping supporting me in League of Legends and doing all this stuff. I'd like to thank my new team, Area of Effect, for all these guys helping me hopefully come back in the Challenger Series and, make something of my bad end of the career sort of deal. And just thanks to everybody who's been continuing supporting me over all this time. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks, everybody.